Later in this hour, it's official. The mastermind behind the Paris atrocity did get into Europe posing as a migrant. We'll look at the security implications of that. But let's start the hour, as we do here on The Breakfast Show on LBC, bringing you your opportunity to put calls and questions to some of the most important people in the land, including the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, senior politicians. And in front of me now, banking boss who's been coming in probably for just over a year. Ross McEwan is Chief Executive of the Royal Bank of Scotland. It's good to see you again, Mr. McEwan. Thank you for coming in. But I have to say, your trade or profession, it's a very dark day. The front page of the Financial Times, inside all the newspapers, the appalling collapse at HBOS. It seems shambles, lack of professionalism. How are my listeners meant to have any confidence in the sort of blokes and women who work in banking? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. It's a great introduction, isn't it?
Yes,
to
it
the
is.
CEO of RBS. Look, it was atrocious. I mean, what happened, it was all about growth. It wasn't about customers, and I think that's what we're changing at the Royal Bank of Scotland. You've got to get back to facing customers and doing the right thing by them, and that's what my mantra has been with my senior executives. And growth isn't what it's all about.
And I appreciate it's not your bank. You weren't involved in this bank. It's a totally different bank. But there were people at the top who didn't even have any banking experience, Mr. McEwan.
Well, I think it also goes back to some of the very, very bedrock things that you have to have in a bank. Good risk appetite statements, that you understand what you lend against and what you don't lend against. All the basics seems to be completely thrown out of the window in those days. We've got to get it back to being good, solid things that people can trust again.
Each time we catch up, you always tell me the progress that you're making, how RBS is doing. Where do we find ourselves now?
It was about 7 months ago we caught up.
Yeah.
I think... Good.
I'm glad the date's in your diary.
Good progress.
If you'd asked me, I'd have found out.
You told me I had to come back with an 8, I think. Look, I think we're making good progress. And I'll be quite clear, we've got a lot of work still to do, but this bank is getting back into good shape. Our core businesses are running well. I think we're doing a lot of good things for customers. Still some things we should be doing, but we're getting there. Look, we've just recently launched our rewards program, which gives all our account holders, if they sign up for it, 3% off their household bills on their main transaction account. The other thing I'm really proud of too is we've just launched out a free overdraft for £100, and these are free for 600,000 of our customers. Now, these are the people that are likely to end up with somebody who's going to charge them a lot of interest, where they can get it for free for us. Just for that 100, where they slip over, they're not enough to pay the final bills before the next pay comes in, don't need to go to a payday lender. Some of those things are really important. The other one we chatted about last time, Nick, was how the old hero rating, where you put a hero rate out and then 3 months later you put the rates up on somebody.
Yep.
Well, we've gone and the first bank to do a flat 3-year insurance policy on your house. First bank to do it. So you know how the old days, now you get a low premium and then year 2, bang, up it goes.
Like your car, it's just ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
They lure you in and then that's it.
Well, we've said cut that practice out. We've got a 3-year flat home insurance policy, and let's see how that goes as well. It's just trying to be fair to customers, and that's our mantra.
First call in just a second. Graham, you're going to be the first caller. Just final one, coming back to the scandal that was revealed yesterday. Should executives linked to these scandals be allowed to work in the industry again?
I think when they're that bad, the answer is no, and I think we're getting onto that. No, the new senior managers regime will make sure that executives that have done damage to banks and to customers of that nature shouldn't be in this industry.
Graham's in Manchester. You're through to Ross McEwan. Go ahead, Graham.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, in light of the cyber attacks on TalkTalk, what is the Royal Bank of Scotland doing to ensure that its customers are safe? And if there are any attacks, who pays?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one, Graham. There are attacks. This is what we came out with a couple of weeks ago and said to people, just be very, very careful where you put your data and who you give your information to, because there are attacks happening constantly, particularly against banks, and you saw that against TalkTalk. These attacks happen. We need to make sure that every piece of our customer data is kept safe. We do attack ourselves to see how vulnerable we are. We have people who are constantly onto the cyber situation. We do work with the industry as well to make sure that we are keeping information safe. But it is an ongoing, you just have to stay one step ahead of those who are having a go at you, and that's what our job is.
Quick response from you, Graham.
Yeah, I had a recent occurrence where I had to ring RBS because I found some malware on my laptop, and they were not sure at all. One bank said, yes, you're covered. The other bank said, no, you're not. And to be honest, I think it needs to be made clearer.
Yeah, no, good point. Because we we do take accountability where it is purely in our hands. But there are some situations where we it is up to the customer to look after their own situation, particularly around what's happening in their home and who they're giving their information to. But Graham, happy to pick that one up. If there are pieces that we should be looking at for you, very happy to find out what those are. Graham
talked to one of the team, and she will pass it on to the gentleman who's accompanied Mr. McEwan, and I'm sure they will get back. Thank you. We move on. Ray in Edinburgh, you're through to Ross McEwan. Go ahead, Ray.
Good morning, Ross. I wrote a book on the collapse of HBOS, so I was particularly interested in the report that came out yesterday from the regulator. It showed a picture of a bank that was out of control and a regulator that was frankly too weak to spot what was going on. Can you assure us that the regulatory regime now is tough enough to make sure that we don't go through another disaster like that?
Yeah, Ray, I think you picked up on a couple of points there. One, I think I know we have a much, much stronger regulatory framework. It's no longer one organisation that regulates financial services organisations. As you would know, we have the PRA, which is the Prudential Regulatory Authority, looks after the capital position. And then you've got the separation of that from the Financial Conduct Authority, which looks after the customer issues. And they are much, much stronger organisations now. And one's looking after customer issues, and the other one is building a very strong framework for banks. And that's why we've been very clear of we needed more capital. We needed much better sort of liquidity into our business, and we have both of those things now. And the regulator, I think, doing a much better job.
But shouldn't the regulators have taken more responsibility for what happened to HBOS?
Well, look, it's interesting. It would be interesting to go through the report and see what happened there. I think they would clearly say that they didn't have enough controls over these banks. Now I think they do.
Quick response from you, Ray.
Do you think, Ross, that it's a healthy relationship when the regulators and the banks are so close together? Shouldn't there be an element of fear on the part of the banks when the regulator comes in to investigate them?
Well, look, let's be quite clear there. This is not a cosy relationship between us and our regulators. There is good tension there, and there should be. But we should, bank CEOs like myself, we should be very keen to have a very strong financial position for our bank, particularly us, because we went broke. And my aim has always been to build a much stronger bank so this never happens again to RBS. And on the conduct side, which is around what happens with customers, again, we've been very strong in my time saying we want a great bank for customers, and we should be aligned with the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority. And of all banks, I think we're doing a fantastic job at that. Still lots of work to be done. And still, we're learning the lessons just as the regulators are. But I think a different position to 7 years ago.
We move on after this, Mr. McEwan. This is the Financial Times, it remains striking that such a widespread failure of one institution and its supervisors, I remind the listeners, not the one Mr. McEwan is Chief Executive of, but I go on, should until now have resulted only in the sanctioning and fining of one executive. That is neither fair nor prudent. They're right, aren't they?
I think they are right. I mean, I've got to say they are right when you look back, it's 7 years on that it's taken this sort of time. But you've also got now much better regulation around what will happen to executives when they get it wrong this badly.
We move to Alex in Edgware. You're on the radio. Alex, go ahead.
Hello, Mr. McEwan. Yeah, you talk a good fight in regards to what you're doing at the RBS. In regards to Europe, we've heard lots of rumours that businesses are going to reposition themselves globally should the UK make a decision to come out of Europe. Can you say what your position is at the current time on this?
Well, Alex, if you give me the information about what the rules of the game are, and I'll give you our answer. But until we've got some more information, and what does our Prime Minister David Cameron negotiate? What I'd be careful of is, from our perspective, we'd want to make sure that we understand what the rules from a financial services perspective are, because we do not want to be trapped out of Europe. So let's see what the rules of the game are, please, before I make comments on it.
Quick response from you.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that these are sort of considerations that I think big business in the UK is already making it very clear that we want to reform Europe rather than withdraw from it. So I think that the current vote is a bit stark, knowing when you talk to businesses what businesses want. And I think that's going to be a difficulty for members of the public to understand because there's a sort of slightly different agenda there.
Yeah, just on that one though, I think we do need to know what the rules of engagement are before we sort of say one way or t'other. And I think there's a little bit of water to go under the proverbial bridge yet, and before people come out and make their commentary.
Mark Carney, the Governor of the Bank of England, said EU membership opens up the UK economy, makes it more dynamic. Is he right?
I think it does, yeah. And what we don't know is if we aren't in it, what happens to all these agreements that we currently have? There's hundreds and hundreds of trade agreements that we'd have to put in place if we came out of Europe, but it depends on the arrangements of coming out. So this is why I think we're better off, spending a month or so understanding what the rules are, and then having a look at the consequences and making them very clear to the people of the UK.
How important has Mr. Carney been to the financial recovery of Britain?
I think he's been a very good leader. He's overseen what's happened with the Bank of England. He's kept great stability. But there's a whole working there of that whole organisation that I think is very, very good.
And just coming back to Europe, what would your instincts be, in or out?
I'm probably more towards the in, given the ramifications for businesses coming out. But again, let's see what happens in the next couple of months. We
go to other callers. This is Ian in Edinburgh. You're on the radio, Ian.
Hi, Ross. I'm Ian Fraser, the author of a book called Shredded, Inside RBS, the bank that broke Britain. I respect what you're trying to do with RBS in terms of rebuilding trust, turning around the retail bank, abolishing teaser rates, etc., etc. But there are some huge issues which have been surfacing in recent weeks, particularly with relation to the alleged falsification by RBS of business customers' files, the central files you hold on business customers. These were documented at the Cambridge Symposium on Financial Crime in September by a guy called Andy Keats. They've also been documented in the Times and various other international newspapers. And the allegations basically are that RBS is, on a kind of industrial scale, falsifying the core files on SME customers, and these falsifications of the files are allegedly enabling RBS to then win against these customers with whom it's in dispute and who allege that your bank,
And I've got to move you to a question, Ian. So is the question, is this true? Or what, to sum up, and you'll stay on the line, but I need a question here.
How concerned are you, Ross, about these very credible allegations of deliberate falsification of customer files?
Yeah, Ian, can I just push back on this? Because every time I get trapped on this and people say, we've looked at each of those, and I'm sorry, you keep saying that they were allegations, and that's what they were, but no one has proved these things. We've looked through these files. I had 8 of them across the desk, and I'm sorry, they're just not true. So, this is where people...
I've seen...
Yes, and so have I, Ian, and I understand, but I'm going to push back. You show me where it's gone wrong and show me what difference it would have made to the actual case that was held and the outcome of that. That's the piece. Because there are a number of people who are having a go at this bank constantly, and I don't mind facing them face to face. We've done that, but they've got to put it on the table.
I'd be very happy to meet with you and bring the evidence.
All right, okay. Ian, we'll take your details. If Mr. McEwan wants to pursue that, we will. Thank you. David's in Kyle. Go ahead, David.
Good morning, Ross. How are you?
Good, thank you, David.
Good. Ross, you actually sent me an email a year ago. I had sent you one, and you very kindly replied. And you said to me, I want RBS to be the most trusted bank by 2020. We have a long road ahead of us. Now, the question is, given all of it, and I guess touching on what Ian there was just saying just now, given all of the damaging allegations with Global Restructuring Group and all the rest of it and the closing of it, etc., how do you think you're getting on?
David, I think on the Go Forward Bank, we're doing very, very well. But, we do, and I said this on the program last time, we've got some bumps in the road and some big potholes to get through from the past of this business. And what's fascinating to see, some of these things take up to 10 years to wander their way through regulatory process, court processes and the like. So we are having to deal with that as we move forward. But I think the bank itself and the people in this bank that are taking it forward, I think, are doing a good job. But I'll be the first to say we've got a lot of work to do on this bank, as many banks do, to be the trusted bank. But we've set it out there for 2020 and making good progress.
Quick response, David.
Well, I'm actually one of those within your global restructuring group. I'm actually still in the court process within Scotland. The bank pulled me down. On top of that, the trustee who is now in place has had RBS appointed as commissioners. If RBS wish to be trusted, why on earth don't they let the people who have got to do their job just do their job without interfering all the time? And would you be prepared to meet with me and with Ian?
David, as long as the conversation isn't a backward conversation, because to be quite honest, I've met with a lot of people from the GRG situation, and I've asked them for their files, and I've asked them to they keep saying you've got all these accusations, put them on the table for me, please. That's all I ask. Put them on the table.
All right. Rachel, let's go to some emails, texts and tweets that are coming in. Rachel in Bexley said, it's nice to hear Mr McEwan saying the Royal Bank of Scotland is going to be great for its customers. It's not great for its staff. I work there. Why has he scrapped bonuses to the staff in retail banks? Is that right?
Yes, we did. Actually, this week just made the announcement that we have scrapped, and we've also
no wonder she's angry then.
Well, no, we've put the money back into their pockets, so the money that would have gone into bonuses has gone back into people's fixed pay. And the reason
you don't agree with bonuses?
Look, one of the things we've found for our frontline staff who deal with customers all day and every day.
So these are the men and women I see when I go in. They're right, okay.
Their job is to look after your needs. It is not to be incentivated by whether we sell you something or don't sell you something. We want to actually be in a situation where they do the right thing by you, look after your needs, and if that needs some certain sales or products or the likes, services, that's what we want them looking after.
That's what we've done. You qualify for a bonus, Mr McEwan, don't you?
Not for the last 3 years, I haven't, Nick.
But you could do. I know you waive it because of the state of the bank, but so you get a bonus, although you waive it, but the girl or the man on the front desk doesn't. Well, how fair is that?
It's been quite interesting. The overwhelming support for having them removed has been much greater for them from a number of people who actually wanted to hold on to them. And we feel much better that our people are there just to serve the customers' needs.
When is bonus time for your executives? Is it end of year or is it financial year?
It's an end of year situation.
What will you be doing this year, Mr McEwan?
We'll wait and see what the results are against a whole raft of issues, which include customer service, that includes
so you might
the build-up of capital. We'll wait and see what the results are. It's up to the board.
Is it public knowledge what your bonus is?
Yes, it is.
And what sort of figure is it?
Well, it's based on the base. It's 1 times the base salary that I receive. It's all recorded in pages and pages of our annual report.
So what is it, £500,000?
It's double that.
It's £1 million bonus, yes. And we'll hear at the end of this year whether you take it or not.
Yeah, we'll see whether we do.
All right, Simon's in Swiss Cottage. You're on the radio, Simon. Go ahead.
Yes, hello, Mr McEwan, and good morning, Nick.
Hello, sir.
We find we're being pushed into Williams & Glyn's next year, having been a customer of the Royal Bank for many, many years, and having originally been a customer of Williams & Glyn's. But we are being put into Williams & Glyn's without any apparent choice. And how will Williams & Glyn's be constituted? What exactly? How exactly is this formed? Has it got a hedge fund behind it, or what is Williams & Glyn? What security do we have?
Yeah, good question, Simon. And
it's an old name, isn't it? A real old name, Williams & Glyn's. My goodness.
It is fascinating. Simon was in Williams & Glyn, and now we've got him coming back into it. I met somebody last night that was exactly the same, actually, who was delighted to go back to Williams & Glyn. Remember, can I just take you back a wee bit of history? We were edicted as part of the review of RBS and putting the capital back into RBS that certain assets had to be sold. And one of those was the branches of the Royal Bank of Scotland in England and Wales, and 6 branches of NatWest up in Scotland. And they were to go back into a bank, and that would be then, we'd have to sell it by the end of 2017, and that's what we're doing. We've chosen to put it under the Williams & Glyn brand. We're looking at doing an IPO, which is putting it back to the public through an offer on the market at the end of next year. That's our plan at this point in time. So yes, you will be, Simon, back into Williams & Glyn, and we think that'll be a great bank on the high street.
So who owns Williams & Glyn then, or it's a separate institution?
It'll be completely separate, and it'll be owned by its own investors, and just as Royal Bank of Scotland is, so will Williams & Glyn. And the public will probably get an opportunity.
So Royal Bank of Scotland, what will they be called now then? Still be called Royal Bank of Scotland?
Royal Bank of Scotland, yeah.
And NatWest?
Yes.
And what happens to Coutts and Child and Drummond's?
Well, what you're picking there is we are a house of brands, and that's what we traditionally were.
I got a headache just trying to work.
Then we went global and become RBS, and we're getting back to being a house of brands. So in the Royal Bank of Scotland will be Scotland. You'll have NatWest, which will be England and Wales, and you have Ulster Bank over in Ireland.
And the private banks like Child and Coutts and Drummond,
stay as they are.
They survive in London. Okay.
Yes.
Just a headache working it all out. Yeah. Pius is in Chingford. You're on the radio, Pius. Pius, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. The question I want to ask Ross is, does he think that the banks...
Does he think the banks what? I'm afraid, mate, we'll try and get you back. Joel is in Hoxton. Joel, let's try with you. Go ahead, Joel.
Good morning, Ross. Look, I'm just wondering how it is RBS can justify selling inverse flow to Lomu loans to dozens of local authorities around the UK. Now, these loans are costing the councils around 8% in interest when they could be borrowing from central government at around 4%. So, given the serious cuts to councils at the moment, what is RBS doing to allow these councils to renegotiate their loans?
Look, that's a negotiation between the councils and RBS. They were put in place, many of them, over a number of years. We have looked at the capital that's required sitting in behind those loans. They are negotiated with councils, and it is really up for councils, like any other business, to have those conversations.
At Edinburgh Council are having to cut around 2,000 staff to make savings, and we believe a large number of these loans were actually missold, and the councils did not understand the risks involved, the fact they were complex derivative-based loans when they bought them. And so we're asking why RBS is not allowing the councils to renegotiate at a fair value.
Joel, let's stop here. Are you telling me that councils didn't understand what they were buying into here? I'm sorry, I just can't believe that.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Exactly what happened.
Let's hear from Mr. McEwan. Hold, I will come back, Joel. Let's hear from Mr. McEwan.
I just think there are financial controllers within councils who understand these things, and those deals were done over a period of time on the rates that were applicable at the days, and they will have a time frame to them, and they'll roll off, just as we have to accept negotiations where we're at the losing end of it. These are negotiated deals. So, Joel, please don't throw at me that these councils don't understand what
Quick response from you, Joel, and then we must move on. Quick response.
The companies advising the councils like Capita were actually being paid kickback.
OK, we've got to stop now because we're getting into very murky waters. Let's leave that there, Joel. I can understand why you feel so motivated. I'll move on to other areas. Mr. McEwan, what disappointed were you with the figures that came out, I think, third quarter at the end of last month? Your sales were down by 99%.
Sorry,
I've got here a note that the profit slumps was by 99%.
Oh, sorry, profit. Yeah, sorry, it's different to sales.
Profits. I'm so sorry. Profit slump. Yes.
Yeah, look, actually, the underlying performance of the business was very good. Our sales were,
but profits. So that's a drop.
Well, we actually had a number of one-off big hits coming through there, and some on the other side, some uplifts. So the actual overarching profit, attributable profit, was up over the same quarter last year. It was down on the quarter prior. So we're doing pretty well in our core banks, but we have got, as I said the last time I was here, a number of one-off hits that will come through this bank probably through to the end of 2017, when we'll get the conduct litigation and the restructuring we're doing on the bank.
Kenneth in Dartford, I live off savings. Does Ross McEwan have any idea when the interest rate might rise?
I think interest rates will stay low for a lot longer than people anticipate.
What do you mean by that, Mr.
Well, I think you'll see them through to the end of 2017, low interest rate environment.
No change at all through 2017?
That would be my picking on it. I certainly think that it's going to be very low right through 16 into the beginning of 17.
What do you want to hear from the Chancellor next week?
Well, just what's happening with the economy and the direction of the economy. I think it's going very well from what we're seeing from our banking position, that people are feeling reasonably comfortable. Yes, we've got some uncertainties around whether we're in the EU or not, but the economy is running quite nicely at about 2.5 to 2.7%. Unemployment is down, which is really good, and it looks like interest rates will be lower for longer.
The positioning of the Labour Party at this time, how favourable is that towards the banking industry?
We haven't had a lot of interaction with the Labour Party at this stage. We've seen a number of the MPs.
Have you met with Mr. Corbyn or Mr. McDonald?
No, I haven't at this point in time, but it would be just interesting to see what their views are on from a financial services perspective and also for business.
Do you think they can be friendly towards banking?
Well, it's interesting. Mr. Corbyn was at one of our entrepreneurial Spark businesses down in Brighton very recently, which is where we're building these enterprises that help new businesses get going. We'll have 13 of those by the end of the next year. Mr. Corbyn was at one of those just after we'd opened it, and I think was very impressed with it.
You've had a bit of a bashing, so let's finish with a final question. Nothing at all to do with finance. I know you're a big sports fan. Obviously, I know you're a New Zealander. New Zealand probably lost the best rugby player they have ever had, or probably will ever have, didn't they, this week?
Well,
you must have seen Jonah Lomu in action.
Oh, well, actually, it was just a catastrophe for New Zealand. He's a legend. He was, when you think about 1995, professionalism in rugby, he was the person that made rugby a global game in the sense that he was the superstar. And at 40 years of age was an absolute tragedy to lose Jonah Lomu. My daughter had a photograph with him at one of the rugby cups recently, 18 days ago.
This
the Rugby World Cup. And you see that, and you see this giant of a man who's just a humble individual.
Well, I was going to say, I spoke to a rugby reporter down in New Zealand on the day. Apparently, huge humility. You've obviously met the fella.
Yes.
I mean, I saw him play at Twickenham. Well, he just steamrolled.
But he had humility coming out of him. He was just a lovely gentleman and would talk to anybody. And I think that was what we've lost, is just a great person, one of the greatest ever rugby players.
One of your greatest ever sportsmen, actually, across all sports, isn't he?
Well, I met him in Japan at a game, and he is a superstar in Japan, just as he is right across the UK, even in the United States, and South Africa. So, look, a big loss to New Zealand and to rugby.
Good to see you. When should we put it in the diary again? Another 6 months or so?
In your
Come
hands,
and take your bashing again.
Nice
take it like a
you.
Kiwi. Stand up to it. Ross McEwan, Chief Executive of the Royal Bank of Scotland, here on LBC, where news is next.
There's a danger that we all go away and panic about what happened in Paris. Terrible, terrible events that we're all very, very shocked by. But it's my job to put in place plans to keep them safe.